Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Christine. I like to read dark and disturbing things, and today I'm going to be talking about what I have read so far in the month of May. So I like doing these mid-month wrap-ups because it gets too hard for me to remember at the end of the month absolutely everything I've read, and it makes the videos a little bit long. So today is May 16th, and I am going to be talking about what I've read in the first half of May, and then at the end of the month I will finish up and let you know what I read in the second half, as well as what my favorites of the month were. So far this month, if you see me looking down, I'm looking at my journal, but I have read 6 books so far completely. Well, sorry, I shouldn't say that. One of them was a DNF. So I had 1 DNF, and 3 of them were books that I had previously owned before this year, so they count for my Read What You Won't challenge. So let me just start off I'm just going to go down the line with what I read in the order that I read it. So the first book I read was Knock Knock Open Wide by Neil Sharpson. This was a book that Kelsey from Slime and Slashers had as her book club pick, and it just took me a while to get my hands on it from the library. The author was very kind and sent me a copy of it digitally, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work on my Kindle, so I just let it come through from the library. That's why I don't have the cover with me. But this was my first time reading from this author. This is a hard one to really nail down like a subgenre. It is like an Irish folk horror slash family drama slash relationship slash romance book. It's hard to really nail down, and I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think everything needs to be pigeonholed in one particular genre. And let me be honest, if I'm going to read any kind of romance, it's going to be as a subplot to a bigger story. And that's the way I like it. So this one starts off with a woman who is driving home from a party, and she's kind of like in these isolated country roads when she comes across a man, or I should say a corpse, in the middle of the road that is being eaten by wild dogs. She gets out of the car and can't handle just leaving this person there to be eaten by dogs. So she picks up this person, puts him in her vehicle, and just goes to the very first farmhouse she can find so that she can make sure that this person is taken care of and has a proper burial, and the people that might be looking for them can find them. But things don't go quite as planned, and some horrific events happen at this farmhouse, which, let me tell you, is like if there's a fear that's going to get me every time, it's these really isolated farm settings that like I see a lot in Rob Zombie movies, because I feel like those can totally happen. I feel like people that are so isolated from everyone else just does not have to follow any rules. Like anything can go in those areas, in my mind anyway. I don't know if that's true, but yeah, that's gonna make this girl uncomfortable. So I thought the intro, like I wrote down in my little notes, like page 40, that this beginning was freaking bonkers, and I didn't see that coming, and I just thought it sucked me in right away. I was into it. But then we take a 20-year jump into the future, and we start following the lives of 2 college girls. I guess we're in the point of view in this book does jump quite a bit, as well as time, like going back and forth. So if that's something you're not into, it might not be a book for you, but I didn't find it too difficult to follow. So we're following these 2 girls that are in college and develop like a friendship slash relationship throughout their time together. And the book kind of slows down a bit in this time period, and I didn't mind it. It was written so well that I felt like these were not characters. These were really real people in my life, and I was following their relationship as it blossomed, and I really enjoyed it. If this was how romance was written, I could probably be into romance, because it was slow burn enough for me, and it was so realistic. These The interactions between them were so realistic. I just loved it. I was having a good time. I didn't even care if horror came back into this story at this point. I was just in it. I found Neil Sharpson's writing to be wonderfully descriptive without being flowery. So sometimes a writer can go too far with the purple prose, and I know that it kind of alienates some readers. This was not that, but it was still very descriptive in a way that you just felt like you were in the story. You could picture everything. I could picture everything in my mind as it was being told, and I could feel the feelings of the characters as we were going. I also found the writing to be tongue-in-cheek at times, which I appreciate that type of humor or that type of like sarcastic commentary. I was into it. So what the heck is this book about? Eventually you will see how the story of these two college-age girls mingle with what happened 20 years prior. And it is just a very slow telling, creepy story that, I don't know, I really liked it. There were some moments, if you read the synopsis, it talks about a children's television show named Puckeen that has like this magic box that supposedly holds something that the watcher never sees. I will say that this part of the story is definitely towards the end of the book, and so you're not going to see that through the majority of the story, and that part really kind of gave me Mr. Magic vibes from Kristen White. I will say the strengths. The beginning was phenomenal. I loved the character building and the story building throughout the story, but the ending was a little bit weak for me. I kind of wanted a little bit more. But overall, I had an amazing time, and I gave this book 4 stars. All right, let's just get this one out of the way. Next, I read the Richard Laymon book of the month. If you're following along with the Year of Laymon with Kelsey from Slime and Slashers and I, we've been reading a Richard Laymon book a month, although we both skipped last month because of Old School April, so we kind of have some making up to do. But I decided to start with the one that was due for this month because I didn't want to constantly feel behind, and that was Come Out Tonight. Whew, okay. You guys know I hated Beware. This, I think I hated more. Beware was just very odd, and didn't make a lot of sense to me. This one, I mean, I guess it made sense, but the first half of this book is one long, drawn out essay scene, basically. And then the rest of it is more essay, but it is just a different scene involving different people. So the synopsis on the back of this is that we have two characters that are about to get it on for the first time, and the guy in the situation only has like this gross, crusty, shriveled up condom that's been in his wallet for 10 years. And she's just like, nah, okay, we could do this another night. He's like, no, I'll go out. I'll go down the block. I'll go pick up some condoms. Just stay here. Don't put any clothes on, of course. Stay here. Stay ready for me. Stay ready for me, baby. And yeah. He doesn't come back. He's taking way too long, and she is starting to get very worried and eventually decides to go out and find out what happened to him. And it leads her on this path of a very long night where she meets some people that are not who maybe they say they are. And yeah. My problem with this book, my main issue with this book is that I honestly felt like this was written for disturbed men to read and get off to, and I just didn't like being part of it. It was just gross. I mean, I don't think I'm easily offended. I know that when I pick up a Laymon book, that there's always going to be this weird sexual stuff in there. And I understand that, and I'm usually okay with it. But this was just, to me, crossed the line, because I really did feel like he was writing this for the pleasure of people who would be into doing those things. And I just was pretty grossed out by it. The other thing that really irritated me with this book was that, I mean, basically every single, if I had read this as a young person, young woman, I would probably never trust men, like not even a little bit. And because he writes all of his characters to have the worst morals ever. Like every single guy in this book is down to sexually assault somebody. Every single one. And he even writes like the victim, some of the victims of this. Okay, so my second issue was actually that he starts talking about a certain female character who is overweight and therefore completely ugly because she's overweight, and also nobody would ever possibly want to get with her, to the point that she should feel grateful if she was essayed because she is overweight. And I was like, I just couldn't. I couldn't. Even the person who wants to essay everyone doesn't want to essay her. And then he writes it so that this person enjoys being essayed, because they should feel so lucky to have anyone touch her, because God forbid she's overweight. Okay, I'm done with my rant. Don't read this book. Whew, okay, I'm glad I got that out of the way. Next, I read Linghun. I listened to this as an audiobook, and this one is about this town that exists where if you're able to get a home in this town, if you're able to purchase a home in this town, the spirits of your dead loved ones can come alive and live with you for as long as you stay in that home and live there. So this is not like a haunted house story. It's more of a haunted town. However, you do need to have a house. So this was a very interesting read or listen, because you have a large group of people who obviously want to live in a home because they are driven solely by the desire to see their loved ones again, and driven by their grief. And it is just such a somber tone that this book has throughout. I usually don't feel like gothic kind of tone books work with me very well, because I think I'm always expecting more to happen. But in this one, it sat perfectly with me. It really, I don't know, it held my interest the entire time. I didn't really know where exactly this was going to go. But we are following in particular one family, and we're in the eyes of the daughter in this family. Her younger brother had passed away when he was quite young, and basically her mom and dad live only to see him again. Even though she's still there, she's kind of invisible. She's the ghost in the family because they're so focused on seeing him again. So they have to pick up where they lived. They moved to this new town. And it's considered very lucky to even be able to have that opportunity. And everything revolves around making it so that you can see their son again. And it just really speaks a lot about grief and how that affects different people within a family. There was a quote in here, and I'm paraphrasing, about how this town worships the dead but has no respect for the living. And that really hits hard because, yeah, you see it in real life, and you see it in this book with the way that the daughter is treated. There's no respect for her. There's no respect for the families who are camped out in lawns hoping to either be invited into a house or have an opportunity to like purchase a house through an auction and the lengths that they go to do that. This was just really kind of a heartbreaking story, but I absolutely loved it. It talks about grief, generational trauma, isolation, and yeah, this was my kind of book. The only thing that took me by surprise is that I was listening to an audiobook and I kept seeing like how much time I had left, and then the story abruptly ended. And I was kind of like in shock because and confused, but it turns out that there's another short story after this. And so I kept thinking I had more to go, that, you know, when you like have this, you have this expectation that there's going to be more, and then there's not, and you're just like, wait, no, whoa, what happened? So I do think that it was too short, which, I mean, if you have a critique and the critique is that you want more, then that just means the story was really good. So it was a little too short for me. I would have read it for much longer, and it was a little bit of an abrupt ending, but it hits hard, and I think that's what it meant to do. So I really enjoyed this. I don't know if I want to give this 4 or 4.5 stars, 4.25 stars. It's a high 4. I will say that. Like, I do highly recommend it. This was on Everand if you have that audio service, to give it a listen or to pick it up. All right, next I read my first Adam Neville book. I've had this on my shelf for a while. I had gotten this from Nightworms, and this is The Vessel. And this is a story about a woman named Jess who is just a struggling single mom, who is trying to do the best for her child. Her child is getting bullied in school. The mom really wants to move out of her home, which she feels is not a safe situation anymore. She wants to get her child out of this bullying situation so she's able to move. She can go to a new school. So she takes this job where she is a caregiver for an elderly patient with dementia. She comes to this job and it already is starting off on the wrong foot. She's kind of late. The other person that works there is irritated with her. So she doesn't really get the full background of this patient, but instantly she's being physically abused by this patient. If she gets too close, the patient is just very violent and combative, even though she can't walk. Like, she shouldn't have the strength to be able to do these things. And it's kind of like a case of you're the only one seeing it happen. So if she actually tries to talk about it, no one can believe the things that are happening, because the company that she works for is like, she has not been able to walk for 3 years. Like, there's no way that she's getting up and doing these things that you're saying she's doing. So it is very much a case of not being believed and really struggling with day-to-day life on top of it. I think Adam Neville did a great job of capturing the feeling of being a single parent, or a single mom in this case, where there's only so much you can do. You have to go to work. You need to provide. You have to do these things that are not healthy for you. And then, you know, all hell's breaking loose at the child's school, and you can't just leave your job and go take care of it. So just the struggle of all of that felt very real to me. And then having to not have childcare all the time, and having at times to bring your child to work. As a parent, I haven't experienced this, but as a child I have, and it just felt very real to me. So our character Jess has to bring her daughter to work with her, and oddly enough, our elderly patient really takes to this daughter, and she's very kind and sweet and actually interacts with the daughter, and they start whispering and giggling and doing stuff together, and the mom is just so confused but also happy that it's working out. But then her daughter starts to have behavioral changes that are so unlike her, and things just go from there. I mean, this is a shorter story. I don't want to, and this is under 100, this is a 160 page story, so I don't want to go too far into it, but it definitely had a creepy feeling throughout. It has a fairly satisfying ending, and it was a good read. I enjoyed it. I would give it 4 out of 5 stars. Next up is my DNF. I really went back and forth on if I should DNF this book or not. That is Gideon the Ninth. I've heard rave reviews about this book and the series, and I was really excited because I wanted to read more fantasy, and this seemed like it was dark fantasy that I would really be into. And I just want to say that I didn't DNF it because it's a bad book. I DNF'd it because it just wasn't working for me, and I read a little over 60% of it. So I do still want to talk about it a little bit. The plot is very difficult to explain. Very difficult. And it could be that my understanding just wasn't fully there. So we are in space. We are in different planets, and our main characters are from the 9th planet. We have 2 females, and they are enemies, but they need to work together. One is a necromancer, and one is more of a warrior type character that need to work together because the warrior is basically a prisoner and wants to get away. So she will get her freedom if this mission works out. And the necromancer, who has the upper hand in this situation, in this relationship, wants this to work out. And I believe it is for a title of some sort of power. It is not really explained, or if it is, it went over my head. So basically we have candidates from each of the 9 planets, and they are in a centralized location, and they have to basically figure out what the challenge is. They're not even told. They're like, okay, solve it. What's the problem? I don't know. You need to figure it out. You need to figure out that, and you need to figure out the solution, and then you win. So it is very different from a lot of like Hunger Games or things where we have very clear defined rules to a game, or, you know, like a Hogwarts situation where you're having to learn these different things. They're given no guidance. They're just told to go explore and figure out what it is that we want from you. So it turns out that they're finding keys as they go along, and then the key will unlock a new area that they can explore and figure out. That is the best that I can explain this plot. And so I'm sure if you're a big fan, maybe you're like, she's got it all wrong, and I'm sorry. It was the best I could do. So the things I really liked about this book is I liked the main 2 characters. Our main character, Gideon, is a very sassy, sarcastic person. And there's a lot of like very formal, like royal speak in this, it seems like. And it's a really weird combination of having like this super formal thing, like they have to look a certain way, and they have to speak a certain way, and act a certain way, like they've trained their whole lives to be this way, like just royalty type stuff. And then you mix in her sarcasm, where she'll speak like this and then also say stuff like eat a bag of dicks. So it was kind of off-putting at times, and it kind of pulls you out of the story, but at the same time I kind of liked it. I went back and forth if I was into it or not, but I enjoyed that she was a unique character. I enjoyed that she was a powerful woman. I even enjoyed the way that our 2 main characters kind of swipe at each other and make attacks and on one another, that kind of thing. It felt real. It didn't feel forced as it does in some books. Their relationship felt authentic, and I really enjoyed it. And then her necromancer has all these cool powers where even if she just has a fraction of a bone or bone dust, she can do all kinds of cool magical shit with skeletons. And I was like, yes, how could this possibly go wrong? Well, it just got really boring for me. It kind of turned into what I felt like was an Agatha Christie situation, where all these people are looking for keys, and you don't know who to believe and who's backstabbing who. But at the same time, I was so confused about other characters, because every character goes by either a first name, sometimes they go by their last name, sometimes they go by their title, and then sometimes they go by a nickname. And that was too many freaking names. Like, you've got 2 or 3 people from each of the 9 planets, and then they're all going by 3 or 4 different names. Totally unnecessary, created so much confusion. So with the exception of 1 or 2 characters in here, I did not care. I didn't know really the difference between them. I didn't care. If people were dying, it was like, oh, who is that? And then I'd look at the front where it tells you like what planet they're from, and I'm just like, oh, okay, no big loss, because I had no idea who that was. And that's just how I felt for so long. Everyone kept saying, oh, it gets better after page 300. Well, the book's only like 450 pages. So to me, I tried to hang in there. I kept going back and forth if I should DNF or not. And I eventually just did. And I was buddy reading this with Kelsey from Slime and Slashers. And her and I were very much on the same page of not understanding the same things, having the same issues, and liking the same things. And she finished the book, and she didn't really fully understand it, even though she got to the end. So there were elements of this that I really enjoyed, and I wanted to be into it more than I actually was. So I had to make a call and DNF it. I think it was the right call. I'm sorry it didn't work out for me, because I do feel like I'm missing out on something. And I do really like a lot of the elements that this author was trying to do. I just feel like it didn't quite work. So yeah, it was a DNF, but there's like no bitter feelings towards it like there was with the Laymon. And last but not least, let's end this on a great note, because I got the arc of I Was a Teenage Slasher by Stephen Graham Jones. Whew, okay, so I was so excited when I got approved for this arc on NetGalley. You should see, my NetGalley is not great. Like, I get approved for books, I have them, I forget about them, or I have plans to read them, and you know how life happens. This one, no. This one was queued up. I was ready to go. Have I read the last book of the My Heart is a Chainsaw trilogy? No. Should I have been reading more newer books that haven't even come out by Stephen Graham Jones? I don't know, but I did. And I loved it. I went in this totally blind. I was hooked in with the author and the title. And I think that if you liked My Heart is a Chainsaw, in particular the first one, I think that you will really like this, because it is different, but there are a lot of the same vibes going on. So we are following a character named Tolly, and I hope that's how you say his name. He lives in a small town in West Texas, and we are pretty much just following his life in the small town. He is grieving the loss of his father. His father died in a tragic accident about a year prior to this, and he and his mom are still grieving, and he just spends his time hanging out with his best friend Amber. Amber and Tolly end up going to a party thrown by other people in high school, and you get the idea that they're not really in the friend group, they're kind of on the outside fringe, but it's a small town, so everybody is at this party. And some crazy shit happens at this party. I don't want to ruin it, but all hell breaks loose. And from that moment on, Tolly feels like he was kind of infected by something that happened at this party. His best friend Amber, who is obsessed with horror movies and slashers, says, you know what? I think that you might be a slasher. I think that we need to maybe rule out that the possibility of you being a killer, like a slasher. And she runs all these tests on him to kind of prove her point. And we just go from there. There's a lot of backstory that I'm skipping over because this story comes from Tolly's head. He's actually writing this as an autobiography 17 years in the future. And he's, you know, writing it out, explaining what happened. And it is very much stream of consciousness and a little bit ADHD. I really felt like I was in the head of someone with ADHD who was telling me the story. And once I really got into the groove of it, I loved it. Sometimes I had to think about what he was saying, like, where was he going with it? Oh, yes, okay. because his mind is kind of all over the place and we are following along with him. But because we are in his mind and because we are in this like stream of consciousness type writing, you feel like you were part of this small town in West Texas. You feel like you were part of this small group of friends. And I loved it. There are some horror scenes and they are delightfully gruesome. The details in some of the kills, loved it. I know a lot of people have a hard time with Stephen Graham Jones's writing style, and I would say if you ever just go on YouTube and look up an interview with him or something and just listen to the way he speaks, because once I heard the way he speaks, the writing made sense. He has like a way of saying something and then going, yeah, at the end. And in this book, the word was what. For whatever reason, the way that I speak, the word what would be at the beginning of a sentence. So if my friend was like, hey, I just got in trouble by my parents. And I might respond, what? Like, are you grounded? But he would say, are you grounded? What? I don't know, it was backwards, and that happens a lot in this book. And if you just flip those two around, and maybe it's just the way that I speak in my area of the country as opposed to in Texas, maybe that's how they speak there. I don't know. It was almost like a Canadian A at the end of questions. Like, it's just like, hey, are you hearing me? So there was a lot of that. There was just a lot of following his brain. But we're actually at the core of this following someone who is a good person who has been afflicted with this issue of being a teenage slasher. And I found it to be a very unique take because a lot of times if you are reading a book from the point of view of the killer, you are in their mind of things that are disturbing or hateful or whatever, right? Whatever's going on in the mind of a killer. But this is a person who doesn't want to be a slasher. This is a person who just wants to be a normal, good person and cannot help what's happening. So I found it to be very unique. I had a super fun time. I will 100% be buying a copy of this when actually I've already pre-ordered it. So when it comes out, so thank you to NetGalley for the early access on this book because I had a marvelous time and I will be, like I said, purchasing my own copy once it comes out. I'm trying to think, did I say too much about this book? But I just loved it so much. I gave it 4.5 stars. Oh, I gave it 4.5 stars, and I should just say that the reason I took off a half star is there are some, what I thought were pacing issues at times where things got repetitive. Times where Amber's kind of testing Tolley and the same thing is happening over and over. And I'm like, yeah, we get it. Okay, let's go. Let's go. Let's get to the action because we know there's some action coming. But that was such a minor complaint in the grand scheme of things. All right, I feel like I babbled on for a long time, but that was everything I've read so far this month in May. I'm already in the middle of other books, and at the end of the month, I will be wrapping up everything I read and let you know what my favorites were for the end of the month. If you've made it this far and you want to say hi, but you don't have much to say, you don't want it to be awkward, just leave me an emoji down below. What should we make our emoji? How about a knife? A knife for a slasher. And let me know, what's your favorite book that you've read so far this month? All right, you guys, thank you guys so much for watching. I always appreciate you listening to me ramble on as always, and stay spooky.